I sat in my quiet apartment watching my brother Cody's wedding live stream on my laptop. It was a public-facing, influencer-style wedding live stream, with a camera crew constantly recording every moment for their followers. The camera bumped, catching his new wife Caitlin whispering in the background, "Maya isn't here because she is pathetic and controlling," she hissed. "Good riddance." Then the feed went dark. They had officially cut me out. Before I tell you how I tore their world down, drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from. Have you ever been the one who gives everything only to be called the problem? I would love to know who is part of our community. I didn't cry, I didn't throw my phone across the room, or ask why my own blood would treat me this way. Anger wasn't loud this time. It was clinical. It was an audit. I closed the live stream tab and opened a new one, my banking portal. For 5 years, I had been the silent investor in their version of a family. Now, I realized it had been a subscription with me footing the bill, and I was canceling my membership. My fingers moved across the keyboard with absolute precision. I navigated to the joint investment portfolio I managed. It was an account I had meticulously funded and grown to secure the down payment and maintenance for Cody's luxury townhouse. He thought the money just magically replenished itself because he was destined for greatness. He had no idea I held the master key to the $70,000 Freedom Fund. I looked at the balance. $70,422.15. I didn't feel a shred of guilt as I initiated the transfer. I wasn't taking anything that didn't belong to me. This wasn't revenge. It was accounting. I moved the entire balance into my private sole proprietor account. The screen flashed a green check mark, confirming the transaction was complete. It took exactly 3 minutes to dismantle the financial safety net they had taken for granted. 3 minutes to withdraw my silent support. They weren't shocked by what they had done to me. They were about to be shocked that I had stopped playing along. I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of cold water, and stood looking out at the city skyline. I had spent years pouring my hard-earned salary into a sinking ship, believing that family loyalty meant unconditional financial backing. I thought my money was buying stability for my brother. Instead, it was funding his delusion and his new wife's entitlement. By the time they finished their grand reception, the account they relied on to pay their exorbitant homeowners association fees and property taxes would be sitting at zero. I didn't need to scream or make a scene at a vineyard. I just needed to cut the wire. Let them have their perfect, drama-free day. Tomorrow, the reality of their independence was going to hit them like a freight train. As the sun set, I sat in the quiet of my living room and reflected on the last 5 years. I was 29, a financial analyst who built wealth for corporate clients during the day, and apparently ran a charity for my brother at night. Cody was 26, a struggling architect whose grand visions rarely translated into actual paychecks. I had bankrolled his entire degree. When he needed a place that matched his so-called aesthetic, I fronted the down payment for his downtown townhouse. When he insisted he needed an exclusive office space to attract high-end clients, I signed the commercial lease as his guarantor. I had laid the invisible foundation for his entire adult life. He and Caitlin lived in a glossy, curated reality paid for by the for the overtime hours I worked. But why did I do it? Why do any of us endure this kind of prolonged exploitation? We fall into the trap of normalizing cruelty. It starts small. A forgotten thank you. A dismissed boundary. An expectation that your resources are communal property. Over time, the toxic behavior becomes the baseline. You convince yourself that because they are family, their manipulation is just a quirk, a temporary phase you need to support them through. The psychological mechanism is insidious. We believe that if we just give a little more, sacrifice a little harder, they will eventually see our worth and reciprocate. We normalize their cruelty to protect our own hope, but it is a lie. Unconditional love should not mean unconditional funding for someone else's disrespect. I had been paying them to tolerate me. Caitlin, at 25, was a socialite and aspiring influencer who viewed my practical, quiet life with outright disdain. She hated that she lived in a home I had secured, so she dealt with that insecurity by diminishing me at every opportunity. I was just the boring sister with the spreadsheet. But a spreadsheet doesn't have feeling. A spreadsheet only deals in facts. And the fact was, the foundation I had built for them was entirely revocable. They had assumed my silence was weakness. They had mistaken my generosity for a permanent obligation. But the thing about an invisible foundation is that when you quietly remove it, the people standing on it don't realize they are falling until they hit the ground. It took exactly 4 days for the panic to set in. I was at my desk running quarterly projections when my phone screen lit up with Cody's name. I let it ring. He called 3 more times in rapid succession. Then came the text. The automatic withdrawal for the townhouse maintenance had bounced. He was locked out of the investment portal. He demanded to know if there was a bank error. I didn't reply. My silence was a wall they could not climb. By that evening, Caitlin's pristine social media feed shifted from curated honeymoon content to passive-aggressive warfare. Since she couldn't reach me directly, she took her outrage to her audience of 20,000 followers. I watched her latest video story from the comfort of my sofa. She was sitting in the living room of the townhouse I had paid for, looking perfectly aggrieved. It is so heartbreaking when family tries to tear you down, she told her camera, her voice dripping with manufactured sadness. Cody and I are just trying to build our dream life, but some people just cannot handle others' success. They use money to try and control you, and when you establish healthy boundaries, they lash out financially. It is toxic, and we are choosing peace. I stared at the screen. Financial abuse? Controlling? I hadn't controlled a single thing they did. I had simply stopped paying for it. Caitlin's gambit was a classic influencer tactic. Play the victim to control the narrative. She wanted her followers to validate her entitlement. She wanted to frame my withdrawal as an unhinged attack on their happiness. But she was playing checkers while I was running a forensic audit. Let her have her likes and her sympathetic comments. Social media clout does not pay a mortgage. It does not satisfy a bank. While she was busy curating her victimhood for the internet, I was meeting with my mentor and attorney, Gretchen. I had handed over every financial record, every lease agreement, and every contract associated with my brother. Caitlin thought she was winning the public relations battle. She had no idea that a real war was being fought on paper, and she was entirely unarmed. Gretchen was a woman in her late 50s who possessed a mind like a steel trap. We sat in her downtown office, surrounded by stacks of legal briefs. I had brought her in to untangle the commercial lease and figure out how to legally extricate myself from the townhouse mortgage, which unfortunately still bore my name as the primary guarantor. Gretchen peered over her glasses, sliding a thick file folder across her mahogany desk. I did a little digging into the property usage. She said, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. Your brother and his new wife are not just ungrateful, they are reckless. She opened the folder. Inside were dozens of printed screenshots and transaction logs. Gretchen had hired a private investigator who cross-referenced their luxury townhouse address with active listings on short-term rental platforms. She laid out the proof. Caitlin has been illegally subleasing the townhouse for the past 8 months. She has been booking it out for weekend parties and corporate retreats while they stay at her parents' house in the suburb. Not only is this a direct violation of the Homeowners Association bylaws, but it also violates local zoning laws for that specific district. I stared at the documents. The nightly rates she was charging were exorbitant. They had been using the home I secured for them to run an illegal, unlicensed hotel business, pocketing thousands of dollars in illicit profit while I continued to pay the foundational expenses. It gets worse, Gretchen continued, tapping a specific clause in the mortgage agreement. Because of the terms of the loan you secured, using the property for commercial short-term rentals constitutes a material breach of contract. It triggers an acceleration clause. My mind processed the data instantly. An acceleration clause meant the bank could demand the entire remaining balance of the loan immediately. And since they had breached the contract, and I held the primary financial stake and the evidence, I had the leverage to force a sale or seize the asset entirely to cover my liability. "This isn't just family drama anymore, Maya," Gretchen said, leaning back in her leather chair. "This is fraud. They have weaponized your credit and violated the law to fund their lifestyle. You hold all the cards now. The lethal discovery stripped away any lingering shred of familial obligation. There was no path to redemption for them. They hadn't just taken advantage of my generosity. They had actively jeopardized my financial future to line their own pockets." "Draft the notices," I told Gretchen, my voice colder than ice. "Accelerate it all." It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. After weeks of back and forth between the bank's legal department and my attorney, the acceleration notice was finally issued. I knew they would come running the moment they received it. Sure enough, that Tuesday afternoon, the receptionist called to say my brother and his wife were in the lobby, demanding to see me. I didn't send them away. I instructed security to escort them up to conference room B. When I walked in, carrying a single manila envelope, the facade of their perfect life had completely shattered. Gretchen was already seated at the table, her laptop open and a digital recorder running to document the entire exchange. Cody looked pale and exhausted. Caitlin's influencer polish was gone. She just looked panicked. The bank had issued the acceleration notice, and the Homeowners Association had slapped them with fines totaling $15,000 for the illegal rentals. "Maya, you have to stop this," Cody pleaded, stepping toward me. "The bank is demanding the full balance. They are going to foreclose. We will lose everything." Caitlin crossed her arms, though her hands were shaking. "You cannot do this to your own family. It is illegal to just take our home away." I sat down at the head of the conference table and opened the envelope. "I am not taking anything," I said, sliding the formal eviction and seizure notices across the polished wood. "The bank has exercised the acceleration clause due to your violation of the loan's use covenant. As the primary guarantor, I have exercised my right to withdraw my financial support and surrender my liability, which triggers the bank's immediate demand for the full loan balance. I am simply removing my legal liability and seizing the asset to cover the debt you incurred." Cody stared at the papers, the reality of his ruin finally sinking in. This is the illusion of power in the empty wallet. People like Cody and Caitlin build their entire identities on the aesthetics of wealth. They project status, superiority, and control, but it is all a performance funded by someone else's labor. They believe that acting rich makes them powerful, but true power does not reside in designer clothes or curated social media feeds. True power lies in capital, equity, and ownership. When you strip away the borrowed money, they have no internal value to stand on. Their superiority was rented, and the lease was up. "You are serving us with an eviction?" Cody whispered, his voice cracking. "We are your blood. You called me pathetic and controlling," I replied, my tone perfectly flat. "You broadcasted to the world that I was financially abusive. I am just giving you the independence you claim to want. You are free now, Cody." Given the material breach of our mortgage contract and the illegal commercial activity conducted on the premises, I have filed a formal notice to quit and initiated eviction proceedings. You have 30 days to vacate the property before the court enforces a formal lockout. I walked out of the conference room without looking back. The fallout was swift and absolute. Unable to secure a loan to cover the accelerated mortgage, Cody and Caitlin faced immediate foreclosure. They were forced to vacate the luxury townhouse and move into a cramped basement apartment on the outskirts of the city. Caitlin's social media presence went dark after a few desperate posts trying to solicit donations failed to gain traction. The public is remarkably perceptive when the facade finally cracked. Cody's architectural firm folded without my financial backing, forcing him to take an entry-level drafting job just to make ends meet. They had built their entire existence on the illusion of success. And without my capital holding it up, the structure collapsed into dust. As for me, my career soared. Without the massive financial drain of supporting my brother, I maximize my own investment portfolio. I purchased a beautiful home of my own, secured a promotion to senior director at my firm, and finally experienced what it meant to live entirely for myself. The weight I had been carrying for 5 years was gone, replaced by a profound, unshakable peace. I was no longer the invisible foundation for someone else's vanity project. I was the architect of my own future. To anyone listening who has spent their life being the reliable one, the one who always pays the bills, fixes the messes, and absorbs the disrespect just to keep the peace, I want to say this. I know how heavy it is to be the family's safe harbor. You convince yourself that your endurance is a form of love. You think that if you just provide enough stability, they will eventually grow up, take responsibility, and finally appreciate you. You tell yourself that being the dependable anchor is your duty, that bearing their insults is just the price of admission for maintaining a connection with your own blood. But there is a massive difference between being a safe harbor and being an enabler. When you constantly shield toxic people from the consequences of their actions, you aren't helping them grow. You are just funding your own destruction. You are teaching them that your boundaries are negotiable and your resources are infinite. It is terrifying to cut the cord. It goes against everything we are taught about family loyalty and unconditional love. The guilt can feel overwhelming at first. You will be called selfish. You will be painted as the villain in a narrative they construct to avoid their own accountability. But loyalty must be earned. And love should never require you to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Sometimes, the absolute most loving thing you can do for yourself is to let them face the storm they created. Let them experience the reality of the world without your protective shield. I've come to realize that my worth is not defined by how useful I am to people who do not respect me. I am not a safety net. I am a person. And stepping away from them was not an act of cruelty. It was the ultimate act of self-respect. I had to mourn the brother I wished I had in order to protect the woman I was becoming. Forgiveness isn't always for the other person. Sometimes, it's the only way to set yourself free. I forgive them for who they are, but I will never again allow them access to the life I have built. I am building on my own ground now, and the view is spectacular. If you have ever had to draw a hard line with your own blood, you aren't alone. Tell me your story in the comments, and if this resonated with you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.